All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Hey everybody, this is Tom Salemi of DeviceTalks. Welcome back to the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast. Got a very special episode for you today, but first I want to just explain a bit of a technical issue. I forgot my headsets at home, so I'm in the hotel room at the Santa Clara at the Hilton in Santa Clara, recording this intro. But the podcast today will have great sound because we recorded it live on stage from the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast. We had a wrap-up conversation at the very end of the meeting. And we'll get into the details of that in a moment. I first want to take a moment just to thank everyone who was part of DeviceTalks West. It was a fantastic 2 days, lots of energy, great insights, great information, great networking, great contacts. Everyone was so happy. It was just wonderful to be amongst Medtech people again. And we had a terrific opening session. We had great meetings with partners and sponsors. So I really couldn't have envisioned it going any better than it did. So thank you to everyone who was part of it. That includes our sponsors. That includes our content partners, all the OEMs who sent their best and brightest to share their solutions to their healthcare problems. And of course, to the hundreds of attendees who were there on hand, filling every room, asking questions, being part of the process. And I hope learning to MedTech better, making better connections. And everyone who was there, everyone I talked to who was there left, I think, feeling inspired. And that's what we really try to do. So thanks again to everyone who was part of DeviceTalks West. This podcast is, once again, we did this in Boston. We're doing it again. We're going to do a summation of the 2 days. I have on stage with me Chris Newmarker, my podcast partner, the executive editor of Life Sciences at Mass Device. We have Sean Whooley, associate editor at Mass Device. Kayleen Brown, our fantastic managing editor at DeviceTalks, who spent her days not only moderating panels, but also interviewing folks downstairs in our DeviceTalks studios on the expo floor. That's something we did for the first time. We'll definitely do that again. And finally, we were joined by Joe Mullings of the Mullings Group, who always brings great insights and observations on the medtech industry. I'm also grateful to the Mullings Group for their help in promoting DeviceTalks West with the great content that I recorded down in their studios. So great 2 days. I can't really thank everyone enough for just being part of that. It's so enriching and rewarding. And I'll let the interview take it from here. But once again, I'm just so very grateful. So before we begin, I think I'll have a sign off at the end. No, I won't have a sign off at the end. Just follow us on LinkedIn. We would all love to connect with you. And we want to make sure we're letting you know what's happening at DeviceTalks. We have a lot going on, a lot of great projects coming out. And of course, DeviceTalks Boston is happening on May 1st and 2nd in Boston. We're already working on that agenda. And I've already got some ideas to make DeviceTalks West, which is taking place next October in Santa Clara, better as well. So make sure you're connected to all of us, Kayleen Brown, Chris Newmarker, Sean Whooley, myself, connect with Joe Mullings. He's a great guy to follow. And of course, connect to DeviceTalks and Mass Device. All right, once again, I'm going to play a wrap-up panel that we did at the conclusion of DeviceTalks West. And we'll be back with our regular DeviceTalks weekly podcast programming next week. Thank you, everybody in DeviceTalks land. Hey, everybody, this is Tom Salemi. Welcome back to the DeviceTalks weekly podcast. We're here at the Santa Clara Convention Center, live in the glorious theater, which has a name, but I can't remember what it is. But it's a great space, and we've had so many great keynotes and conversations here in this room and in our other 4-track rooms. And it's my pleasure to be here on stage with my podcast partner, Chris Newmarker. Chris, hey, good to see you.
Good to be here, Tom, in person.
In person, that's right. And we're joined by Fast Five guy, Sean Whooley, associate editor of Mass Device.
Thank you for letting me join today.
Do you have 5 things you're going to say today?
No.
Okay. Setting expectations low. I love that. All right. Joined by Kayleen Brown, our extraordinary managing editor who has been interviewing and moderating nonstop for 2 days. Welcome, Kayleen.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the extraordinary compliment.
Oh, my gosh. I've been so impressed by what's gone down on our exhibit floor. And happy to bring back Joe Mullings, our in-house expert on all things MedTech from the Mullings Group. Joe, welcome.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate the opportunity.
You like that little shift of the voice? All things MedTech. I don't know where that came from.
Medtech megaphone.
MedTech megaphone. I am high on conference adrenaline right now.
You're a pro, Tom. You're a pro.
So here we are. We actually have people in the room. God bless you folks for staying past the end. Woo! Let's hear it for folks in the room. Let's talk about the past 2 days. Chris Newmarker, you've been sitting in many sessions. What were some? Let's start with one key takeaway, lesson, experience, joke, whatever you want to share that you learned over the last 2 days. Only a clean joke, though.
I just say, and I'm cribbing a little bit off of Joe here, but I mean, I definitely.
He hasn't even gone yet.
Yeah, we've been chatting. We've been
So he'll
chatting.
be cribbing off you.
I'm just saying. I'm like, I didn't come up with this totally on my own here, but I mean.
Oh, we all steal from each other.
Yeah,
Don't
there
worry
you
about
go. It's true, but I mean, I kind of definitely got the feeling that like we're just beginning to treat brain conditions. That's going to be a significant area of growth for MedTech, and I especially got that feeling on a panel that I moderated today with executives for Boston Scientific and Brain Labs, and they were describing a partnership that they'd had to develop real-time brain imaging software that enables faster, more effective, placement and programming of deep brain stimulation systems. But they were saying that they're just at the start of like learning what they could do with this, and like what they could. And the same thing went with a panel that I moderated yesterday in neuromodulation, that they're just beginning to figure out like what they could do with that technology.
Yeah.
And we were talking about this earlier, and I really think brain is the new heart, right? So when you think about the big leaps that happened in device over the last 40 years, we've pretty much saturated the cardiac market, right? You had that logarithmic uptake, right? Balloon angioplasty, stent, drug-eluting stent, structural heart. But now you start to flatten out there, even if it's imaging, diagnostics, and eventually you get the AI in. And we did that from open surgery to LAP to robotics. And now you sort of got incremental increases across the board. And the brain, I think, is a brand new frontier. Mm-hmm. And, you look at what Imperative's done and a lot of other platforms, you're going to have over the next 5 to 10 years, that logarithmic jump. Again, it's the last organ I think we're going to see that with. So you're going to see more investment money go in there. You're going to see a lot of acquisitions go in there. You're going to see roll-ups go in there that will then be platform companies that I think the big strategics will have to buy because the franchise is so large.
But do we know the brain as well as we know the heart? I mean, I agree. I think the technologies are advancing. I think the business models are advancing too. I think
we definitely don't know the brain as well as the heart. I mean, that's what's kind of exciting about it.
Yeah. No, but I'd see. I missed your panel because I was doing my own panel. But Cognito Therapeutics raised a lot of money early this year, and they have an interesting space. I think I don't know if they're looking at sort of going to the DMA space of having devices brought home. There seemed to be a lot of movement in neuromodulation in terms of getting these devices into the hands of the patients.
And Cognito was exciting because they're talking about using using neuromodulation to treat Alzheimer's. I mean
that's amazing stuff. We're talking about brain and neuromodulation. I don't want to point to someone unless they have something to add. Kayleen, do you have something to add?
I have a yes.
We should develop a system. You want to do we tug or rub our noses or something?
It's a yes and. So I completely agree with Joe, and I get what you're saying, Chris, but I want to do an and to that. So I moderated a pediatric device panel earlier where we were talking about heart devices and cardiac devices, but the innovation in that space is actually bringing the devices smaller, and I think that's where we can see some cardiovascular innovation. But to your point, Joe, I mean, I do think brain may be the new heart, but we can still revisit other innovations in older spaces, but kind of reinvent like the size and the functionality and who it's serving. And one of the real takeaways from that panel was, looking at pediatric devices, not for the aged 0 to 18, but the fact that they have 60 years of life after that. So how do you build devices that increase and improve the quality of life post aged 18? Mm-hmm. That's where the innovation, I think, can come.
And the panel that you moderated was really good. But you look at what they said. Look at the feature improvements, lower profiles, right? Taking a complex device and making it simpler so you could take it out of the hands of the super gifted operators, and how can you bring it down to the average operator. So to me, those are incremental increases, incredibly important. But when you have these logarithmic jumps, I think the brain is going to have those more than any other organ moving forward.
And when we say the brain, do we talk just neuromod, or do we talk about neurovascular as well?
Talking neurovascular,
Yeah.
what was it yesterday on the panel with Imperative? Think about what the brain does: emotions, attention, speech, motion, behavior, social interactions, all quality of life things. And so, as we look at that, you've got electrical, you've got vascular, and then you've got other things that we don't even know about. We haven't mapped it yet. So you can take all of that, and really has not been a lot of innovation there, so to speak. And I think we've already saturated coronary, cardiac, in that area. Again,
there needs to be so much innovation. I mean, I was looking up a stat on the CDC the other day. I mean, somebody has a stroke in this country every 40 seconds. Someone dies of a stroke every 2 minutes in this country. I mean, there needs to be innovation.
Right. And the bar is pretty low on treatment. Right? It's pretty low on treatment. So that's right.
And continued care. Kind of, again, another yes and. So the bar is really low about stroke treatment and neurovascular treatment, but helping support the patients who are post-treatment. The bar is very low there too. But I'm seeing innovation out of Can Do Health and other organizations that are trying to chip in there. So yeah, maybe brain is the new heart.
Well, it was interesting talk with Fred Khosravi of Imperative Care about their approach to treating stroke patients post-intervention with devices, and that seemed to be a theme that was kind of emerging a lot. Again, I said at the time I wasn't sure if it was because I'm aware of this theme and now I'm starting to see it, or if it's just starting to emerge, but medical device companies seem to be adopting a new language where they're not just developing a device, but they're treating patients. And we've always said that, and it's true, but I think we've always seen that treatment of patients ending with the device, the deployment of the device. Are we seeing a changing in how medical device companies will be looking at treating patients and helping patients going forward? Is there going to be a more holistic approach, or is it a mission that only a few can really undertake?
You've talked to the VCs, talked to PE, talked to the large strategics. They're more interested now in platform technologies, where in the past we would buy a device that solved the problem, and still we do. But the platform technology development is really where now you're going to start to look for a full therapy. We're old enough to go back to the EV3 days, right? So those 4 properties by themselves were good. But when you rolled them up, it became a platform play. And then it became a very interesting play for, at that time, Covidien and Medtronic. And so I think you're going to see more platform development, and the venture community wants to see more platform development versus single device.
And as a platform development, is it a
Look at Imperative. So as an example, it's a platform development.
Is it to be, obviously it's to benefit the patient, but I also can see, and maybe not in the case of Imperative, but overall, if you treat the whole patient, the whole disease, your results are better. I would guess your interaction with payers is better. You're actually impacting things, and it's something that you can. Is it something that's going to help medical device companies make a better business case for?
So I think what you're going to do is you're going to start to see, and I think I know where you're going right now. So we're going to start to look for subclinical signals in monitoring, right? So if I can, who was it? Dave talked about it. Rosa talked about it today. Is Intuitive going to make a smaller robot eventually?
Yeah.
Right. Well, you can only make a smaller robot if you're using a different sort of application, because just based on physics and what they do and the forces you need, where they are right now in robotics is really important. But if you can start to get subclinical signals out of monitoring of individuals, and you can intervene earlier before it's a catastrophic or episodic of grandiose surgery, well, then you've got a platform that then moves down to subclinical from a diagnostic all the way through therapeutic. So you've got platform technology development that way. Right? So you can treat the therapeutic side really early subclinical before it becomes, maybe it's a lifestyle change, maybe it's a pharmaceutical change. So you're going to start to see the inclusion of pharmaceuticals, biotech, device, harmonizing towards a convergence, and that diagnostics really early to catch the monster when it's tiny.
Interesting. Kayleen, was your observation, or do you want to and with another observation?
I have an and. But I feel like we're still on a kind of a specific track, but I am interested in talking about sort of these cross divisions working together in collaboration. I'm sure we'll get to that.
No, let's continue, please.
Great.
Yeah.
So I think that at the beginning of the podcast, Tom, you had asked sort of what themes or common takeaways that we've been seeing. So for the past 2 days, and as you mentioned, Tom, I've been behind the camera or on the stage. So I've had the privilege of really hearing from people a lot smarter than I am, how they see medical devices and their role within it. And the common theme across the board, with no exceptions, has been collaboration. And Joe, you were talking about how collaborating with VC, with the clinicians, collaborating with the OEMs, like this kind of group collaboration, and then perhaps starting or intervening early is really where you're going to be able to drive innovation faster and more effectively and safer, and even potentially serve more diverse populations. So there's been this complete recognition, and this is what I'm hearing over the last 2 days, that we need to open up communication. We need to have more seats at the table, and we need to fill those seats and fill them with diversity from the people who are on the front lines, the clinicians who are actually using the devices, and even maybe patient advocacy, so the patients who are experiencing their health from a different perspective, the large OEMs, the manufacturers, the suppliers, I mean, really every point of the medical device product continuum. If we can get around the table and get there sooner, there's less obstacles in the way. There's more option to course correct. And then it really kind of builds this feedback loop. So if we go through the end of the cycle and then it goes to market, and we continue asking the questions from all the stakeholders that I mentioned, then we go back again and we continue iterating and improving those devices for better health outcomes. It's been a fantastic takeaway.
There was a common thread, Fred Quattravis, Holly Scotts, and Todd Houston on panel. Tom Test said it when Holly opened it yesterday. Tom Test said, if every single person in your organization, whether it's admin, the engineer, if they can't articulate very clearly the workflow that your device is involved in and the impact that it has either on removing time, increasing outcomes, reducing cost, then your organization is not positioned properly. And that revolved around talking about engineering and a career in medtech, right? But it was so important because if the entire organization cannot truly articulate what it is that your device is doing and why it should exist in the first place to all the stakeholders, the financial, the nursing, the clinician, the interventionalist, the surgeon, the payer, the provider, if you can't articulate that, I think you're missing a major gap. And that's where I think that these smaller organizations that haven't sort of developed that entropy, because the more complicated you get, the heavier it is to move messaging through it. That's where these nimble organizations like Shifamed, like Imperative, who were here and very active in this last 2 days, that's where they have an advantage. And I think if you solicited anybody in any of those organizations, I'm going out on a limb, they could probably articulate everything as to why that device exists.
Well, Kayleen and I had the pleasure of visiting Shifamed the day before the conference, and I seen Natin Saluka out there in the audience. And I was struck by just the energy of the place. Just walking through, I'm like, this looks like a really fun place to work. Like, everyone was engaged, everyone was excited, everyone was looking at monitors, you could feel energy. And they do seem to have a commonality, and they do seem to have a way that they've brought the medtech messaging across the board to everyone we talked to. Everyone we bumped into was like very, very interested in having us being interested in what they were doing. They're very proud of what they were up to. And we got to see some cool clot-sucking technologies. That was pretty neat.
It really was the highlight of my week, and no offense to DeviceTalks West.
We're right here.
It's such a fun job we have. That clot-busting, sucking technology is like the high point.
It was on my finger. It was very cool.
I gotta hold it in
Sounds
my
like a
hand.
T-shirt.
No, really, Tom, though, I mean, it made me fall in love with the industry all over again, because sometimes we're so siloed, especially when we're behind Zoom all day, that we, for me anyway, sometimes I feel like I'm losing my North Star.
Yeah.
But being in an innovation center where, to your point, Joe, I mean, it's not just sharing of resources for a more nimble community, but sharing of ideas. And I think that's really where the energy came from, knowing that there's kind of this open door, literally and figuratively, policy of sharing ideas, lessons learned, and how can we share what we've learned, what we have, our resources to move health forward quicker. I mean, I'm still riding that high.
That's great. Sean, you were manning the diabetes rooms, and I'll get back to get your thoughts on that in a moment if you want to get them together. But we'll go around the table. Joe, have you offered your own observation yet, or are we still kind of working the circle? Do you have something else from the
Yeah, there's something else that I think is important to talk about. I love the category that Avail's in right now. I really love that category. And I also love the category of the hub and spoke on the treatment of stroke. I love both those categories. My challenge is it's not an if. They're totally going to be here. It's a when. Because when you introduce a technology that is in such a sweeping way changes the workflow of infrastructure, albeit for the better, for everybody involved, the inertia involved in that workforce in order to impact it in such a way is going to take a while. And I think organizations like Avail and the hub and spoke on the stroke side could be one of the most important categories to get hold in healthcare. But it's a pure workflow infrastructure change across the board. And I don't know how we get there, right? And whether it's Avail or CareSyntax or Proximy or Theodore, all of those are really important. But it requires such change for the large OEMs. It requires change in centers of care. It requires change in go-to-market commercial people. And to make that happen, it's not an if, it's a when, and I don't know when that is. And if there's one thing we can do right now, it would be push through that category, that telepresence category could make all the difference in the world for the patients, the payers, providers, and the 18% of our GDP. But I don't know how that happens. And whoever figures out how to do that, so you got to have the product, but you also have to way to implement that product. And are you going to run out of money before you get the engagement?
What's the roadblock there? Is it the technology?
Well,
Avail's doing. I mean, they're packing it.
Everybody's doing great.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they're not doing great,
Yeah.
but that's one of those that it's like the fax machine. The fax machine became more valuable the more fax machines there were.
Right. Good point.
Okay.
Yep.
And so Hani talked about it. He said, and I quote, "You can't dump the tech on the hospitals." Right. And I do a lot of work in that telepresence space, and the biggest barrier to entry is trying to get the digital transition of the provider community to understand what does success look like for the clinician, the CFO, the charge nurse, all the users. And you can get initial adoption, but ongoing utilization requires a re-education and a reimagining of every stakeholder in the provider network. And so that's where I think the headwind, I think the tech works.
Yeah.
I think the concept is spot on. Whether it's sales, clinical trials, digital scrub-in, it makes sense. It's a no-brainer. But how do we get that changed? And I think it's probably got to be somebody like an AT&T or a telecom play that brings that in and has the resources to change the culture digitally, or else you're dumping a digital solution on an institutionalized sort of entity. And I don't know how that works its way through.
And the hospitals, I think, are still somewhat in crisis mode, or they're still recovering from COVID.
Right, but it's not a CapEx, so it actually is medicine they need.
Right, but if they're too exhausted to even take the time that we know people who are bringing in Salesforce, which is great, but the training that goes behind Salesforce is extraordinary.
Oh, and they're already overworked.
Yeah.
And so I think the way you have to get that is, how do you leverage and bribe the payers to drive that through?
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
So,
Sean, what did we hear in the diabetes room?
It actually played directly into Kayleen's point about collaboration. Both presentations, Insulet was about the development of the Omnipod 5, Abbott sort of how it got to where it is with its Freestyle Libre and what the next steps are. And they both spent a lot of time crediting partners, other companies they've collaborated with, Insulet obviously with Dexcom and Abbott, and integrating CGM into automated insulin delivery. Abbott likewise with Insulet, Novo Nordisk, and Pens, Bigfoot Biomedical, which it actually just bought. So a lot of collaboration on that front. And then a lot of questions, if you want to play into overall themes, a lot of questions about digital and AI. It won't really go away. And sort of on everyone's mind as a buzzword. So that's sort of the takeaway, I thought.
Questions as to whether it would provide benefit, or questions as to this is definitely coming and we're not sure where we're going?
All of the above, yeah. How are you folding this in? How are you putting this in the mix? Is it worth it? I don't know. I
didn't get to sit in the presentation by Pristine Surgical, but I understand it was pretty. Did anyone get to sit on that technical forum this morning? But
I was in there, but
I talked to Sid at Desai after, and just talking about their use of AI and bringing it into the scopes and sort of the data collection there as well. It sounds like they're creating a whole new class of things that I wasn't even aware existed.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of the questions around that were, security around the data. What exactly are you doing with it? Putting it into these models and just kind of letting it fly, or is there moderation of these models? It's, a lot of questions, and frankly, some of it goes over my head.
Yeah, no, that's mine as well.
One thing that struck me was how many of the sessions when the company spoke about what was next with their innovation, it inevitably went to software and artificial intelligence. Like I wasn't hearing as much about hardware. Like for example, the Ascensus surgical talk, they were talking about the next generation Luna system, and there's all kinds of neat innovations they're doing with the hardware. But one thing was that system, they're not building it just for the next year. They're building that to be a system for them for 10 years. And, their future innovation is going to be software that they're, putting around that system.
That's interesting. I really enjoyed the opening conversation with Julie Tyler of Abbott, just sort of unpacking how she approached taking over at Abbott Vascular and going through the assessment of where they needed to go and what they needed to acquire and how the products needed to bring in, how that led to the acquisitions of CSI. So I really am grateful to folks who come in here and unpack their thought process and their process of putting these companies together. And I thought the keynote with Fred Khosravi was great as well. And to the point about diversity, I think everyone in the room wasn't sure where he was going when he said this might be a sexist comment, and I fortunately had a pre-call with him, so I forgot for a second where it was going, and then I remember where it was going, so I started breathing again. But his point I thought was great, that the real change is not going to come until women are in more positions of influence, because they bring that different perspective, and they bring that more holistic view, and they bring that different perspective than the hammer and nails point of view that men bring in. So I thought that was a high point of the day, and it certainly ended day one on a strong note. Joe, any other one? We'll just kind of bounce around again for
I want to touch on the robotics thing, and you did a yeoman's job of trying to get Hani to admit to something, but he wouldn't. But I think that the robotics space itself is primed for a revolution right now. I think form factors, I think centers of care, I think that the simplification, as we talked about in my panel of robots, is going to drive a higher adoption. I just don't know if the way I look at it is I think the big strategics need to sort of be the portal of surgical robotics and not the creator. Mm-hmm. Because by design, there's too many cooks in the kitchen, if you've ever worked with any of the big players. And they're great in some things and less than optimal in others. And I want to see them as they stand it up, they finance it, they service it, they have the KOL relationships. But when you have a Moon and a Distal and a Vicarious, that's a tough fight to finance that all yourself and have enough ramp and uptake. So I think they're going to become sort of like the car dealerships. I think they're going to offer the financing. I think they're going to offer the bundling. And they'll have a rev share, talking about your collaboration. They'll have a collaborative relationship with these creators of surgical robotic platforms, because the cycle of innovation is so rapid right now, the big strategics can't keep up with it. They shouldn't keep up with it. They're a distribution supporter of it. So I think you're going to have a change over the next 5 or 10 years where they're the dealership of surgical robotics and then become the pathway through. And that'll allow acquisitions to come in at a much lower rate, because you're not going to have to build up clinical. It's almost a build to buy play. So if I went to J&J and said, if I can get you a robot that does this, and I do this, this, and this, will you help me with clinicals, and can we use your commercial team, and let's do a rev share? J&J would be brilliant to do that, because it would really be difficult to offset their distribution and support network. So that's what I heard hints of while I was here this weekend too.
Interesting. We'll go to Kayleen in a moment, but to Hani Al-Bahaka, the group chairman of digital and robotics at Johnson & Johnson Medtech, was our closing keynote. And he did say that there's Ottava news coming later this year, and maybe you already know what it is. He wouldn't tell us what it is. This is a podcast. No one can see Joe's chest there, his wry smile, but we'll let it be. But I also asked him if J&J would have a soft tissue surgical system within the next 5 years, and he indicated that that's what he's there for. So, I take that as all systems go there. But again, you probably know things that I don't know. So, but there does seem to be direction there, and I did enjoy my conversation with him and his perspective on global situations. I noticed the term digital surgery was all over the place on our agenda this go around, including two panels right next to each other. And I was like, oh no, which one is which? Like, I forget which is. So it's a term that I think we need to further sort of parse and define. Kayleen, what was another takeaway? If you want to continue on this thread, feel free. If you want to take us in a different direction, go right ahead.
Well, I actually just wanted to second what Joe's talking about. So I've also heard, I've inferred similar implications, kind of these large OEMs potentially being kind of the supporters, and you use a great analogy, and I'm not going to restate it, but I had met with Rebecca Whitney of ZimVie, and then I met with several members of Intuitive and Intuitive Ventures, and there was this kind of openness that I hadn't really heard before, saying that we will share our clinical affairs to fill that hole if you fill this hole. And it sounded to me like it was almost this, come to us with this idea that fills a hole or fills a gap in our portfolio, and we will use our resources to try to accelerate that. And I hadn't really heard that before. So as soon as you were starting to talk about your analogy and your observation, I went, oh, I pieced that together. I think that is something that we can look forward to. And I welcome it.
No, it's a build to buy. So it's a classic Reviva Healthcare. That right there, they're notorious for that. They're behind Distal. So what they're doing, and we're going to see more of this, and they're PE, they're not venture. So you'll have these robotic companies that will have a technology, and like a Revival will go to a strategic and say, if I can do this, this, and this, will you buy this? Because imagine sitting here if you were Moon or Distal or Vicarious. You're building a $1 billion platform, arguably, all said and done. By the time you go financing, you stand up a sales force, you run through clinicals, everything, right? Let's just say, okay, $700 million. And you still don't have a buyer. Where else in the world do you do things like that?
Right. Yep.
And so that's not a sustainable model. And so I do think you're going to see more of that come down. And I just want to jump on one other thing, and on the Dave Rosa session, which I love, by the way. I think Dave's fantastic, and you did a really good job, and Dave was pretty clear on that. Dave said something really interesting. He said, so right now surgical robotic companies have to focus on outside the body because does their form factor work, right? And you talk about all the features. He said, but inside the body where you can inform and advise the surgeon what they see and what they touch. And it's a chicken and egg because they've got the hub and Ascensus has the ISU. And both of those are the only two cleared soft tissue robots in the US right now, so to speak.
Yep.
Right? And so they're able to start to get massive case data that then gives advisement to the surgeon. So the head start there and the catch-up factor on what Dave said is the advisement of inform me where I am right now, either margins, stay out zones, right? Ability to measure, ability to have precise, where do I start the staple line? All of that, you can't get that. You can't train your algorithm if you don't have massive data sets on that. And I think that is going to create even a further distance on the Ascensus and Intuitive. Yeah, and yes, I'm putting them both in the same because I think what Anthony Fernando is doing at Ascensus is very, very meaningful. And too many people have got Senhance in their head with Ascensus Transenterics. And I think that organization right now is being underclubbed. And as surgical robotic platforms, the complex ones, start to fall off year after year, I think that Anthony's doing the right thing and he's going to get a lot of attention there.
Yeah, we'll see. Chris, you'll get next shot. Does anyone in the audience want to say something or ask something? If so, I'll come over with the microphone. Okay. If you do, just throw up your hands and we'll have a shot. Chris, One more takeaway. I think we got 10 minutes left. We'll kind of go around the horn one more time, and it can be anything. It can be a nice moment. It can be a lesson learned. Anything else from the day? Just an overall assessment of the 2 days. It's up to you.
I would just say that just the attendance was just so much higher this year. Just a lot of energy, a lot of buzz, and just a lot of good insights. It's just been a great 2 days.
And people were very happy. It was
Yeah.
very. We mentioned the tour of Shifam, and that was a great way to start Tuesday. Another great way to end it was the cocktail reception we had to start. In all honesty, we said, let's give it a try, see who shows up. It was great energy. It was full. A lot of people having a good time. We had to go over to the Goodwin dinner. I didn't really want to leave because it was just a lot of great folks to meet. So, no, I agree. It was definitely a lot of good stuff. Sean, any?
I kind of threw away both my takeaways on the first try, but no, I'll piggyback off that and say that everything was well attended. I really enjoyed. I was trying to find space in Catherine Rieger's intuitive panel presentation yesterday. Standing room,
Yep.
And so it was nice to see all the energy and enjoyable 2 days.
Good. Kayleen, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, and this wasn't planned, but it is a shameless DeviceTalks plug.
No, we can't have any of those on this podcast.
If not here, where? But it really it just happened to work out this way. So I was behind the camera for the majority of the 2 days. So I had the privilege of being in the exhibitor floor, kind of hearing people talk about, hey, there's this recording studio, and here I am talking with Joe Mullings, who is my recording studio hero.
Mine too, by the way.
I'm preaching them. This is my church right here. But what was really interesting was there was kind of two messages that came over these 2 days, and it was really targeted on media. And it was video media, so kind of getting your voice out there and how to do that and the importance of that in a way that I've never seen before. And before, it felt like I was convincing people, pushing them, and again, I'm preaching the converted here, Joe, but pushing people through the door, trust me, come with me on this. And now it was like, I am behind on this. How do I do this? How do I break through this white noise and get my message out here? Again, I'm speaking your language, Joe. And the second part, which was actually a surprise to me and really a testament to you, Tom, so if I'm passing around compliments, you're next.
Thank you.
The in-person element. And I'm a huge proponent of virtual. The sense that I got today is that you cannot move forward unless you are face-to-face. And these industry events are really important and a really important way to do that and have conversations that you wouldn't be able to have through a screen. So it was, how do I get my message to a broader audience? But then also, how do I go one-on-one with the people I need to get in front of to move myself and by me and I mean Medtech, move us forward. So for me, it was really encouraging to think that there is still not only a place for in-person, but there's an absolute need and an appetite for it. So I'm excited to see what next year brings in DeviceTalks Boston. It's going to only grow from my prediction.
No, I agree, and I pulled up my phone because I took a picture. I walked into the foyer, and there was someone with a camera set up with a light. I'm like, who the heck is that? I'm like, this is our show. We have the lights and the cameras. But it was Boston Scientific. They were coming to record a message. It was Ruff who was going to be on the neuromodulation panel, and they were recording something for their internal newsletter. I'll have to say the gentleman doing the interview was pretty good. It's kind of scary that you can run a global business and interview people, because interviewing people is so hard.
Yeah. I want to jump on Kayleen's and then hand it over to you, Tom. So our organization talks about what shows should you go to every year, right? And there's two types of shows. There's you can get access to the key people in certain shows, and it's the AvaMed show, in our opinion, Scott Pantel's LSI show, and DeviceTalks. I'm not saying that because of our relationship.
I was waiting for you to say, and then there's your show.
but your ability to have, and then there's the booth shows. Like I'm at NAST tomorrow, I'm at TCT next week. Those are good shows, but those are booth shows where you're dealing with salespeople, clinical people, and you're walking the floor. The executives of the mid-caps and the large strategic and the startups are very hard to get access to, yet you're bumping into them in all the hallways here. Same thing with AvaMed, with Scott Whitaker's show, right? That he runs once a year. And then Pantel runs a good one, OUS, as well as Dana Point. So, I would just strongly advise, and I did this to a number of startup CEOs who had never been to Avidmed before, and now to your show. I strongly advise that if you've got a budget and you're a startup person, those are the shows that you need to go to without exception, because the pound for pound engagement you get is just unmatched. So that's a tip of the hat to you and your team.
We fight to keep the price low too. It's $6.95. I think it's something that people can handle, but it is. We do try to service everybody. I met some entrepreneurs out here, even though we didn't dedicate a lot of content to them. There were some, and just to break from your point, I want to go back to it, but I talked to one gentleman who's just saying how hard it is to start companies now, and he thinks it's harder than it was 10 years ago. And I think he's right. I mean, I think he's definitely right. I think there's so many more boxes you have to check. I think the capital isn't as effective. It's hard just to start a company. So I think if we can create something that makes it easier for them, we certainly should. And we'll be doing that in Boston. Paul Grand is our chomping at the bit to get going. He wants more space. Paul wants more space at Boston. And I think we might have to accommodate him because it was a big part of the show. And we get to accommodate him, not we have to accommodate him. But Kayleen, to your point and to the point of the video, I'll admit, after the pandemic, I was like, do we really have to put on suits anymore? I mean, I really like this webinar stuff. This is great. And the podcasts are a lot of fun. And I wasn't sure if we'd get back to where we were. But after these 2 days and the 2 days in Boston, I think we definitely need to have in-person, but I do think we need to marry the digital and the video like you do, Joe, at all the big meetings that we're trying to do here at DeviceTalks, because folks in the audience have stories to tell as well, and not all of them are going to be on stage, and we want to afford them the chance to get their messaging out. So that's something we're going to commit ourselves to doing over the next year as well. Joe, you made a point off mic. Boston's our bigger meeting. You said you liked this one a little better.
And I'm a Boston
Defend yourself,
guy.
sir. You're a Boston.
Well, first of all, to my Beantown boys, and I said on the board of Mass Medic, I love Boston. Let's just get that straight. But it's a different vibe. It's not. It's just a different, better. This is got a swagger to it, where Boston has this strong foundation. There's more wire walkers out here.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's just a different vibe altogether. And if you've done business in the Bay Area or Cali, and you've done business in Boston, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And it's just so it's nice, it's not to have a Boston 2.0, right? But it's really a compliment to you that you're able to deploy an event like this with two different sort of vibes to it. So yeah, and my Boston people will forgive me.
I'm still learning. I was trying to wear a tie to Medtech Vision, and Kayleen's like, just lose
West Coast, no.
lose the tie. It's West Coast. Like, good God, man. Although you look great in the tie, Joe. Not you. I'm talking about me. Well, I think that wraps it up there. We got the timer here. I think another high point is nobody left while we were doing this at all.
Good sign.
Tom, there's
See people walking out.
There's
on
two
us.
people
All right.
here, Tom.
Both of you are still here, so thank you very much.
Are two people here? No, there's more people here.
Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad.
But well, thank you to our esteemed panel for offering your insights on DeviceTalks West. Thanks for everyone who participated in the event over the past 2 days. And, of course, thank you to the hundreds of you who are still in the audience here. All right, dozen? Plenty of people. We love you all. Thank you for being part of this silly podcast.